All right, so hi, my name is Andrew Wu, and partner is Kalina Elliott. We're going to be discussing kind of the possibilities of using animal-assisted therapy for the people who have autism spectrum disorder. Now, to give a brief overview of the subject at hand, people on the spectrum generally experience social issues, and that can come down to like difficulty in therapy by traditional methods. For example, sometimes other people might not want to kind of like interact with like human therapists just simply because there's like the difficulty in doing so, but also kind of like the sensory overload. And as a result, that kind of makes traditional, It just asked me to do that. Why?
You can just, yeah, sure, you can just.
Is it starting? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh, no. Oh, sorry.
It's all right.
Okay.
So again, to reiterate, there's basically kind of like difficulty in therapy by traditional methods, even today. So one of the ways that researchers have found that could kind of like improve this kind of therapy is instead of using people, just use animals. As they found out, most people on the spectrum show positive social behavior when around animals, such as kind of like increased socialization activity. And there's also kind of like better forming relationships and connections, not only with the animals, also people. And they're also kind of like fighting like feelings of loneliness, which is a really big impactor towards mental health. As a result, it's highly suggestive that kind of like therapy with animals is going to help a lot to people on the spectrum. And kind of like give like an overview of some of the more common animals, dogs and horses are generally kind of like used, but there are exceptions, and we'll see that in the next slides. So as I was talking about, one of the big issues is kind of like addressing loneliness prevalent throughout people with autism spectrum disorder. There's a lot of difficulty in socializing with more kind of neurotypical people. And that usually leads to social isolation. It's a barrier to future development. And also there's kind of like also like kind of the risk of people on the spectrum being bullied simply because they're not able to kind of like communicate with neurotypical people as effectively. And that is a really horrible thing. And there has been anecdotal evidence that pets could kind of like improve the social ability, not only for like the people on the spectrum, kind of like interacting with neurotypical people, but also in the presence of animals, neurotypical people, and will interact better towards people on the spectrum. And this was mostly anecdotal evidence, however, so it's real empirically unproven until pretty recently. There was a study partially funded by an organization kind of investigating the links between human and animals, and that they found that for people on the spectrum, the children actually, they found replacing inanimate toys with small animals such as guinea pigs facilitated better communication between neurotypical and people on the spectrum. There's a lot of positive social effects, such as kind of like diversified facial expressions. They're more like freely willing to express their emotions. That was not seen as frequently when they were interacting with just toys. There's also more communication with kind of people between neurotypical people and people on the spectrum, such as like starting conversations, maintaining that conversation, of like talking about different topics as well. Overall, this study strongly suggested that kind of like there's an improved social development with pets. And that kind of like having in the presence of animals, there's like a very big ability to kind of just facilitate this better social skills, better socialization, better communication between neurotypical people and people on the spectrum. Now, kind of like explain the graphs a little bit. Kind of like the top right, the top left, that's kind of like detailing how many times people, neurotypical people approach people on the spectrum or vice versa. For toys compared with animals, you can obviously see there's a pretty drastic increase, sometimes even twice as much. Like what? Oh. There's also kind of like the target with like verbal behaviors. That's kind of like all over the place. But so far, at least with adults, it's highly suggestive. There's also kind of like social approach behavior. Again, same thing we saw earlier, a lot of like physical and visual increases. There's also kind of like a problem behaviors decreased massively across the board for both groups. It's when the presence of animals, there's also more pro-social behaviors. So kind of like more positive social interactions. That's what we're looking for. And there's also like emotional displays, massively improved in kind of like the positive aspects. And same thing with kind of like a verbal kind of like things. There's more kind of like positive topics being discussed than negative. There's also a different kind of therapy, which is just using therapy dogs. I'm pretty sure a lot of you have seen kind of like the dogs on campus or kind of like walking around, you pet with them. They can also be trained to kind of like meet the needs of someone who is on the spectrum. They can kind of like track the scent, especially kind of like caring for like a child if like they become lost, especially when they're not in like the presence of their parents. That's one like very pragmatic use of dogs. They also provide kind of like sensory input and comfort to redirect behavior. In this case, it's just basically like when like someone on spectrum is kind of like feeling down or kind of depressed, the dogs are kind of like a better way for them to connect towards them and help kind of like improve their outlook at that time. And as with like kind of like the same studies suggesting on neurotypicals, there's like lower overall stress and depression just being around therapy dogs. And at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Elliot.
So therapy dogs are trained for specific needs, while emotional support dogs are not, and they just kind of provide general comfort to its owner. And a quote that kind of describes the benefit of having a therapy dog reads, "Readiness for many animals to react affectionately to attention make them uniquely suitable to be emotional bridges in therapeutic contexts." So kind of like help those on the spectrum to kind of work through their emotions better. And many people say that therapy dogs have helped their children sleep better because they're forming this relationship with the animal. And if it like sleeps in their bed, then it's sort of calming and soothing. Therapy dogs can also improve people's responsibility and communication skills because they have to be responsible for feeding and taking care of the dog, as well as communicating with it through commands. And then another type of therapy for those on the spectrum is horse or equine therapy. It's also known as hippotherapy, which is a mixture of physical, occupational, and speech therapy. So it hits a lot of different areas. For the physical aspect, it focuses on balance and strength, which is done through riding the horse. And then for occupational therapy, it focuses on motor skills through like steering or leading the horse, just like fine tuning those motor skills. And then for speech therapy, interactions with with horses and people can help to like improve communication when the rider has to ask for guidance and give the horse commands to move. And this type of therapy also improves focus because the riders have to be aware of their upcoming environment. So some benefits of horses and why they're good for therapy is that they're able to mimic their handler or rider's feelings. They've been said to be able to like read people or feel their emotions and also reciprocate those. They also provide an unbiased and non-judgmental environment for those on the spectrum, which is really important. And then building a relationship between the rider and a horse is it requires trust. So that's a good aspect for those on the spectrum to work towards. And with this therapy, people can feed, groom, lead, and ride the horses, but they're always normally accompanied by a therapist or aide and a horse handler. This is definitely an expensive option because it can be more than $5,000 a year to attend sessions on the regular. It can be nearly $75 a session, but there are funding and scholarships available, which is good. So overall, the evidence suggests that animal therapy promotes social improvement in people on the spectrum, but still more empirical research needs to be done to fully uncover why. But the current hypothesis is that animals are less judgmental or biased than having to interact with the actual person therapist. But yeah, does anyone have any fun personal stories with therapy animals?
I think that for me, who like I have a lot of stress in general, but like having my dog, and I also was like a volunteer at the animal shelter when I was in high school, and I think that also means a lot. But I definitely with this family. I think a lot of dog owners will resonate.
Anyone else? I don't see anyone raising their hands on Zoom, so I guess this is it. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was just wondering if either of you did any research on cats, just because I like a cat as an emotional support animal, and I often will get like overwhelmed by dogs. In my space, and they're looking at things happening right now. So yeah, I know dogs are mostly service.
The closest we got, unfortunately, was just the guinea pigs. All of the research articles are also locked behind paywalls. So the one with like guinea pigs is the only one I could actually access completely and like read through it completely. So, but I suspect that the guinea pigs and kind of like cats will be very similar, since both are kind of like passive animals and kind of active animals. That is my hypothesis, but don't take my word for it. I'm not a PhD. I don't do this stuff. Let me see chat. Hold on. Wait.
Oh wait, I want to see your dog.
Okay. All right. Is it?
Oh my god!
Look at it. Wait, look at him. Look at him.
Oh
that's
god.
Cute. That's adorable. Oh wait. Oh no. The dog died. Shoot. Oops.
Are you guys gonna get a new dog? Are you getting a new dog? No.
Okay.
All right. Are you done?
Yep. I'm done.
All right. Thank you.